On Monday morning, I was getting ready for work when I was shocked to discover that my luxury car had disappeared from the garage. Then I received a text message. "Thanks for the car, sis." I just smiled. My younger stepbrother had no idea who that car really belonged to. The next day, he was crying at my front door. "My name is Nina Vance. I am 30 years old living in Portland, Maine, and I have built my entire life on independence, hard work, and complete discretion." What my stepbrother and his mother never realized is that the high-end Porsche Cayenne he so arrogantly drove off with was not just a personal ride. It was registered directly under Vance Media Group, my own corporate entity, complete with strict corporate insurance, automated auditing, and real-time GPS tracking. They thought they had finally pulled off a clever family heist at my expense, believing I was just a quiet office worker they could walk all over. But stealing a corporate asset is a federal felony, and by tomorrow afternoon, reality will hit them harder than they ever imagined. Before we dive into how this dramatic lesson unfolded, please take a quick moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another unbelievable story. Later that afternoon, I drove my spare SUV over to my father's house, only to find my younger stepbrother Brent Holland proudly polishing the hood of my luxury Porsche Cayenne right in the driveway. The cold Maine coastal breeze was cutting through the neighborhood, yet there he stood in a thin designer jacket, casually tossing the microfiber towel over his shoulder, while two of his local friends leaned against the fence admiring the high-end vehicle. The moment I pulled up, Brent grinned with a condescending smirk that immediately turned my stomach, walking over toward my driver's window with the key fob dangling brazenly from his index finger. He tapped his knuckles against my glass before I even had a chance to unbuckle my seatbelt, acting as though he had just inherited a vast fortune through his own brilliance rather than committing a blatant act of theft. When I stepped out onto the frost-dusted pavement, Brent did not even attempt to hide his pride, instead scoffing loudly enough for his friends to hear every word. He told me that someone working a dull, routine office job like mine had no business driving a $94,000 European performance vehicle around Portland when he needed it far more to build an image for his upcoming job interviews. According to his twisted logic, my quiet lifestyle meant I was practically wasting such a beautiful machine, whereas a young man attempting to break into high-end sales required a prestige automobile to establish credibility with wealthy clients. I stood quietly beside my SUV, keeping my coat buttoned against the chilly air, watching him gesture endlessly toward the custom leather interior and polished rims, as if the car had magically spawned in the garage for his exclusive benefit. Before I could even address his delusional rambling, the front door swung open and my stepmother, Darlene Holland, stepped out onto the porch wrapped in an expensive wool scarf. She took one look at us, immediately adjusted her posture, and marched down the wooden steps with a look of stern authority that she had used to intimidate me ever since she married into our family. Darlene stood beside her son, placing a protective hand on his shoulder while looking at me, as if I were an ungrateful stranger trespassing on private property. She bluntly informed me that Brent had taken the vehicle with her full permission because a supportive older sister ought to prioritize her family's future over her own selfish vanity. She added that since I was already comfortable driving my secondary SUV, it was only fair that I sign over the title of the Porsche to Brent so he could officially register it under his own name by the end of the week. My father, Guy Vance, emerged shortly afterward holding a steaming mug of coffee and staring down at his boots while standing near the garage door. I looked past Darlene and called out to Dad, hoping he would show a single grain of backbone and put an end to this absurdity, but he simply took a slow sip of his drink and avoided eye contact entirely. Years of relentless emotional manipulation and constant badgering by Darlene had turned my father into a mere ghost in his own household, completely incapable of standing up to her outrageous demands. Darlene noticed my gaze and stepped directly into my line of sight, raising her voice to remind me that my father had worked hard his entire life to provide for us, and that refusing to help my own stepbrother would bring unbearable stress upon the family dynamic. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper along with a pen, and tried to hand them to me right there in the freezing driveway. Darlene demanded that I write a formal statement declaring that I had gifted the vehicle to Brent, claiming it would save everyone the hassle of gift taxes and state registration fees. Brent stood right beside her, folding his arms with that same arrogant grin, fully confident that I would break under the familiar pressure of their guilt trips, just as I had done so many times during my early 20s. He casually mentioned that he had already promised his friends a road trip down to Boston over the weekend, casually reminding me that ruining his plans would prove once and for all that I never truly cared about integrating into their family. I looked at the three of them, my stepmother glaring at me with entitlement, my stepbrother smugly waiting for his prize, and my father standing silently in the background like a defeated spectator. I did not raise my voice, nor did I engage in a futile shouting match that would only feed their sense of drama and victimhood. Instead, I quietly took the keys to my secondary SUV, turned around without signing a single document, and walked back to my vehicle while Darlene shouted after me that I was being absurdly cold-hearted. As I backed out of the driveway, I watched in my rearview mirror as Brent triumphantly hopped into the driver's seat of the Porsche to show off the engine to his friends. The moment I cleared their street and hit the main avenue heading toward downtown Portland, I connected my phone to the dashboard system and dialed Leon Bennett, the head legal counsel for Vance Media Group. Early Tuesday morning, I sat in the executive conference room of Vance Media Group alongside my corporate lawyer, Leon Bennett. Outside the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, the chilly gray mist of Portland swept across the harbor, matching the cold, unyielding atmosphere inside the room as Leon carefully reviewed the corporate asset ledger on his tablet. He cross-referenced the vehicle registration numbers, insurance documentation, and the purchase contract, confirming that the $94,000 Porsche Cayenne was officially listed as an executive asset under our primary corporate umbrella. Leon looked up over the rim of his reading glasses with an expression of sharp professional clarity, explaining that because the luxury vehicle belonged entirely to a registered business entity and was subject to mandatory quarterly financial audits, its unauthorized removal without board authorization constituted a severe corporate breach. He pointed out that under Maine state law, taking a company asset valued at well over $10,000 moved the act far beyond a simple domestic dispute and elevated it directly into the territory of a Class B felony for grand larceny. While we were going over the remaining compliance paperwork, my husband Wade Coleman walked into the conference room carrying a fresh folder of legal precedents he had pulled earlier that morning. As an experienced advisory attorney himself, Wade possessed a thorough understanding of criminal procedure and immediately agreed that attempting to resolve this matter through private family channels would create disastrous legal liabilities for my firm. He emphasized that failing to report a known corporate theft would compromise our fiduciary duties to our commercial partners, potentially invalidating our corporate liability insurance policies and creating severe tax compliance issues during the upcoming fiscal audit. Wade leaned over the mahogany table to review the live GPS coordinates being transmitted directly from the car's embedded tracking module, noting that the vehicle was currently parked outside an apartment complex near the waterfront where Brent frequently hung out with his friends. With every piece of documentation verified and signed, Leon placed the certified corporate records into a sealed binder, and Wade took my hand as we prepared to head over to the law enforcement headquarters downtown. By mid-morning, Wade and I were sitting inside a quiet consultation room at the Portland Police Department presenting the complete evidence portfolio to Officer Hill. The experienced investigator carefully examined the certified title deeds, the corporate organization charts, and the clear digital paper trail, showing that Brent had never been an employee, contractor, or authorized driver for Vance Media Group. Officer Hill listened intently as I explained that the vehicle had been removed from my private residential garage without my knowledge or consent, and he took meticulous notes regarding the text message Brent had sent me shortly after driving off with the car. The officer recognized that the text served as a direct admission of possession without authority, effectively eliminating any potential defense claim that the keys had been taken by mistake or through a misunderstanding. He made several copies of our corporate insurance policies and verified through state databases that the title carried no secondary liens or personal cosigners, ensuring that the legal ownership belonged strictly to my corporate entity. When Officer Hill asked whether I wished to pursue formal criminal charges or allow time for an informal recovery through family mediation, I answered without a single second of hesitation or regret. I informed him that I wanted the law enforced to its absolute fullest extent, requesting that the department treat the incident as a standard grand larceny investigation without granting any special leniency or domestic exceptions. Wade stepped in to confirm that our legal counsel would cooperate completely with the Cumberland County District Attorney's Office to ensure that every necessary affidavit was filed promptly. Satisfied with the overwhelming documentation provided, Officer Hill officially logged the incident into the crime registry, issued a formal police report number, and entered the vehicle's license plate into the statewide automated license plate reader network. As the system flagged the Porsche as a stolen corporate asset across all regional law enforcement databases, the officer assured us that patrol units throughout the greater Portland area were already alerted and actively monitoring key traffic corridors to locate and impound the vehicle. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, Officer Hill intercepted the vehicle as Brent was parking it outside an expensive downtown restaurant. 2 patrol cruisers pulled up directly behind the Porsche Cayenne, flashing their emergency lights across the crowded valet alleyway, while shoppers and diner guests stopped to watch the unfolding scene. Brent stepped out of the driver's seat looking utterly bewildered, attempting to flash an arrogant smile as if he could simply talk his way out of a minor traffic stop. However, his smug expression dissolved into instant panic when Officer Hill ordered him to place his hands on the hood and immediately informed him that he was driving a reported stolen corporate asset. Within minutes, the officer clicked heavy steel handcuffs around Brent's wrists, right in front of his stunned friends, escorting him into the back of a police sedan while a flatbed tow truck hauled the luxury SUV away to the impound lot. By early evening, Brent was processed into the Cumberland County Jail on felony grand larceny charges, with a magistrate setting his bail at $25,000 cash. Darlene spiraled into complete panic upon receiving the automated notification from the holding facility, realizing that neither she nor her son possessed anywhere near that amount of liquid capital. She spent the entire night frantically calling local bail bondsmen, only to discover that no reputable agency would cover a high-value property crime without substantial collateral or a guaranteed cosigner. Realizing that I was the sole person capable of dropping the charges or funding her son's release, Darlene gathered her coat and drove straight toward my corporate headquarters early the following morning. She was convinced that she could corner me before business hours began, operating under the assumption that I was still an easily intimidated young woman working a modest desk job. On Wednesday morning, my executive assistant Chloe Vance notified me through the intercom that an agitated woman was creating a scene in the main lobby of Vance Media Group. I instructed Chloe to bring her upstairs, allowing Darlene to walk through our glass double doors and witness the full scale of the enterprise I had built over the past decade. Darlene stood frozen in the middle of our high-rise floor, her eyes scanning the sleek glass conference rooms, the bustling creative teams, and the prominent industry awards displaying my name on the mahogany walls. The realization that her quiet stepdaughter was actually the founder and chief executive officer of a multi-million-dollar media agency hit her like a physical blow. Her arrogance evaporated in an instant, replaced by a desperate, wide-eyed bewilderment as she processed how profoundly she had misjudged my life and financial status. She practically rushed across the plush carpet toward my private office, dropping to her knees beside my executive desk, while weeping hysterically about how Brent was too fragile to survive in a county holding cell. Darlene begged me to call Officer Hill immediately to withdraw the complaint, promising that Brent would wash my secondary SUV every weekend if I just spared him a permanent criminal record. I sat behind my desk in silence, watching her dramatic display without offering a single word of comfort or handing her a tissue. When she noticed my cold demeanor, her fake remorse instantly curdled into vicious rage, and she scrambled back to her feet while slamming her handbag against the edge of my desk. Darlene began shrieking that I was an ungrateful monster who had deliberately set a trap for her innocent boy, accusing me of concealing my wealth out of pure malice toward my own family. I stood up slowly, leaning forward against the polished wood, and looked Darlene directly in the eyes with a calm, razor-sharp authority that made her stop breathing for a second. I reminded her that for years she had treated me like a glorified maid, constantly demanding financial contributions while mocking my quiet lifestyle in front of her friends and relatives. I pointed out that Brent had not made an innocent mistake. He had methodically planned a grand theft, bragged about it to his friends, and sent me a mocking message assuming I was too weak to fight back. I bluntly informed her that I would not spend another penny or waste a single breath protecting two greedy parasites who saw me as nothing more than a personal bank account. As Chloe entered with two corporate security guards to escort her out of the building, I told Darlene that her son's trial was officially underway and that she needed to leave my premises before I filed a restraining order against her as well. 3 days later, Brent's court-appointed defense attorney proactively reached out to my husband Wade to propose an out-of-court restitution agreement. The public defender argued over a conference call that Brent was a first-time offender whose misguided actions stemmed from familial miscommunication rather than malicious criminal intent. He proposed that Brent would immediately relinquish any claim to the Porsche Cayenne, pay a minor restitution fine of $5,000 for administrative inconvenience, and formally apologize in writing. In exchange, he requested that Vance Media Group execute an official waiver of prosecution, effectively dropping the grand larceny charge and allowing Brent to walk out of the holding facility with a clean adult record. The attorney repeatedly stressed that pursuing a felony conviction against an unemployed young man would permanently destroy his future career prospects, pleading for a merciful domestic resolution that would preserve family harmony. Wade listened to the entire settlement pitch with quiet composure before firmly declining every single term proposed by the defense counsel. He clarified that as corporate legal representatives, we had a binding obligation to protect company assets and maintain transparency with our board of directors and commercial auditors. Wade pointed out that Brent had not merely committed a minor administrative error, but had deliberately targeted a high-value asset, bragged about his theft on social media, and showed utter contempt for the law until facing actual incarceration. I took the phone and informed the attorney directly that my decision was entirely final and non-negotiable. I emphasized that we would reject any plea deal that reduced the charges, confirming that Vance Media Group intended to move forward with a full jury trial in state court to ensure complete accountability. Realizing that the public defender was pushing for a standard plea bargain rather than fighting the charges aggressively, Darlene spiraled into complete desperation. She concluded that the only way to save her son from state prison was to retain a high-profile private defense lawyer whose retainer fees were far beyond her personal financial reach. Knowing that my father, Guy Vance, would strongly object to draining his life savings for a lost cause, Darlene decided to take matters into her own hands through deceitful means. She located the original title deeds to their shared residential property in Cape Elizabeth, which my father had worked decades to clear from mortgages. Darlene quietly visited a predatory private hard money lender operating on the outskirts of Portland, offering the family home as collateral to secure an emergency high-interest loan. To bypass the lender's mandatory spousal authorization requirements, Darlene forged my father's signature on the loan documentation and real estate equity pledge. She lied to the loan officer, claiming that my father was bedridden with severe illness and had authorized her to sign the mortgage papers on his behalf. Within 48 hours, the high-interest lender approved an immediate cash payout of $30,000, carrying an exorbitant monthly interest rate designed to trap vulnerable borrowers. Darlene immediately wired the entire sum to a defense attorney known for aggressive courtroom tactics, foolishly believing that throwing money at a private lawyer would somehow magically wipe away the overwhelming physical and digital evidence stacked against her son. This reckless financial gamble pushed my father's household directly into a catastrophic financial crisis without his knowledge or consent. The private lender placed an immediate lien against the property title, meaning that a single missed monthly installment would trigger swift foreclosure proceedings on my father's home. Meanwhile, Darlene continued to hide the mounting legal bills and loan notices arriving in the mail, piling them inside her closet while convincing herself that saving Brent was worth bankrupting her marriage. Brent remained in his county holding cell, completely unaware that his mother's blind entitlement was rapidly destroying the remaining foundation of our family. Wade and I monitored these frantic defense maneuvers through public court filings, standing firm in our resolve to let the legal system run its course without giving in to emotional blackmail or manipulative plea negotiations. On the day of the trial, the Cumberland County Superior Courtroom in Portland was filled to capacity with local media reporters and curious community spectators. Brent sat at the defense table dressed in an ill-fitting navy suit, his hands trembling slightly while his private attorney frantically arranged stacks of legal briefs. Across the aisle, Wade and I sat quietly beside the state prosecutor, maintaining a composed and dignified presence while Darlene glared at us from the gallery with unyielding hostility. The presiding judge called the court to order, signaling the state prosecutor to deliver his opening statement to the 12 empaneled jury members. The prosecutor laid out the criminal narrative with surgical precision, establishing that the defendant had executed a calculated theft of a high-value corporate asset belonging to Vance Media Group. The prosecution presented overwhelming physical and digital evidence that systematically dismantled every argument put forward by the defense team. Forensic investigators demonstrated how Brent had used a duplicate key fob retrieved from my father's residence to bypass the residential security system before driving the Porsche Cayenne off the property. The state introduced time-stamped security footage from the garage along with the damning text message Brent had sent to my phone shortly after the theft occurred. Leon took the witness stand to present our certified corporate accounting ledgers, testifying that the vehicle was an audited executive asset essential for client operations and business development. Under cross-examination, Brent's private attorney attempted to frame the incident as a harmless family misunderstanding, but the prosecutor swiftly exposed the total absence of any corporate authorization, driving permit, or employment agreement granting Brent access to company property. The turning point of the trial arrived when the prosecutor called a representative from the private hard money lending firm to testify regarding financial restitution defenses. The loan officer produced certified court documents revealing that Darlene had illegally pledged my father's Cape Elizabeth home as collateral for a $30,000 emergency loan. As the lender displayed the forged mortgage documents on the courtroom projection screens, my father, Guy Vance, froze in total disbelief from his seat in the gallery. He stared at his own forged signature on the legal agreement, realizing for the first time that his wife had secretly risked their lifelong family residence to fund her son's defense attorney. The courtroom erupted into hushed murmurs as my father turned to glare at Darlene, with a mixture of profound betrayal and cold fury, while she buried her face in her hands, completely exposed before the judge and jury. Following brief closing arguments, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning to the courtroom with a unanimous guilty verdict on the charge of Class B felony grand larceny. The judge ordered Brent to stand as he read the formal sentence condemning his complete lack of remorse and blatant disregard for the law. The court sentenced Brent to 4 years in state prison, denying any possibility of immediate probation due to the severe financial magnitude of the corporate crime. Furthermore, the judge ordered Brent to pay full restitution covering all court fees, vehicle depreciation, and corporate audit expenses accumulated during the prosecution process. As court officers placed steel handcuffs on Brent's wrists to transport him to the state correctional facility, he dissolved into uncontrollable tears, frantically calling out to his mother while being led away through the side exit. As the courtroom emptied, my father walked directly past Darlene without offering a single word of comfort or acknowledging her desperate pleas for forgiveness. The public exposure of her forgery had shattered the last remaining thread of his tolerance, forcing him to confront the grim reality of her manipulative nature. Within 48 hours of the verdict, my father retained a divorce attorney and officially filed for marriage dissolution on the grounds of fraud and grand deceit. He secured an emergency court injunction to freeze their joint bank accounts and prevent Darlene from inflicting further financial destruction on the family estate. Darlene was left entirely destitute, facing immediate eviction notices from the private lender, while her son began serving his multi-year prison sentence in the state penitentiary. 3 years later, a thick envelope bearing the official stamp of the state correctional facility arrived at my new residential address. Sitting beside Wade on the sunlit back patio of our newly constructed home in Portland, I carefully opened the sealed document and unfolded the handwritten pages inside. The letter was from Brent, written in a humble, reflective tone that contrasted sharply with the arrogant young man who had once mocked my quiet lifestyle. He began by acknowledging that he expected no response, forgiveness, or financial assistance, explaining that his time behind bars had stripped away the toxic entitlement that had poisoned his early adulthood. Brent confessed that mandatory prison counseling programs had finally forced him to confront his actions, admitting that taking my corporate vehicle was not a harmless stunt, but the culmination of years spent exploiting family goodwill. He wrote extensively about his mother, detailing how Darlene's relentless habit of shielding him from reality had fostered a reckless mindset that ultimately destroyed their lives. After losing the Cape Elizabeth home to foreclosure, Darlene had been forced to relocate into a tiny rented apartment on the periphery of the city, surviving entirely on modest Social Security payments. My father had finalized their divorce 2 years prior, rebuilding his own peace of mind while maintaining a warm, supportive relationship with Wade and me. Brent noted that Darlene occasionally visited him during supervised visiting hours, but their conversations were now hollow, weighed down by mutual resentment over the financial ruin they had brought upon themselves. He expressed deep remorse for pushing our family into public humiliation, acknowledging that my refusal to enable his behavior was the single most valuable lesson he had ever received. After reading through the handwritten pages, I refolded the letter, placed it back inside the envelope, and slid it quietly into my desk drawer, without writing a single line in response. True forgiveness did not require me to welcome toxic individuals back into my private life, nor did it oblige me to reopen doors that had been permanently shut for my own emotional well-being. Choosing complete severance was not an act of lingering malice, but a healthy boundary designed to protect the peace, integrity, and prosperity Wade and I had built together. Brent would serve the remaining year of his sentence, learn the true value of honest labor upon his eventual release, and face the world as an adult fully accountable for his own destiny. In the years following the trial, Vance Media Group expanded its operations across the entire Pacific Northwest, becoming one of the most respected commercial communication agencies in the region. Wade and I continued to flourish both professionally and personally, enjoying a fulfilling life anchored in mutual respect, shared values, and unwavering loyalty. My father frequently joined us for weekend dinners, finally enjoying a peaceful retirement free from constant domestic manipulation and financial stress. Standing by my core principles, respecting my own hard work, and refusing to succumb to emotional blackmail had allowed me to reclaim my life, build an unbreakable business empire, and secure absolute peace of mind. Ultimately, this painful chapter taught me that unconditional love should never mean unconditional tolerance for disrespect, abuse, or criminal entitlement. Real strength lies in recognizing your self-worth, setting firm boundaries, and allowing people to face the natural consequences of their own destructive choices. Protecting yourself from those who view your kindness as weakness is not selfish. It is the ultimate act of self-respect and personal survival. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my story today. If this journey resonated with you, please consider sharing your thoughts in the comments below, as I would love to hear your perspectives on setting healthy boundaries with toxic family members. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful real-life stories, and I look forward to connecting with you all in the next episode.